We are often taught to look outward for the source of evil, to imagine it as something external, separate from ourselves, moving in shadows and taking shape in the darkness of haunted houses or cursed objects. We envision it with glowing eyes, crooked teeth, and a monstrous form. But this belief, while dramatic, is misleading. The real origin of evil, of demons, of darkness is far closer than most are willing to admit. It does not begin outside of us. It begins within. Before an evil spirit touches the threshold of our lives, something must be present inside us that resonates with its frequency. It is the same with sound. A string on an instrument will not vibrate unless a tone in the air matches its resonance. And so it's with the human soul. What we harbor within, whether it be unresolved pain, unacknowledged rage, or deeply buried envy, becomes the very signal that calls dark forces to us. The reflects them not for it, reflection of our own heart. A person who harbors no inner conflict is far more protected than one who hides incense and sacred words while still feeding the flames of resentment, greed, and desire. No talisman, no amulet, no sacred book can shield someone from that which they carry inside. If a man holds poison in his heart, then he walks through life already weakened. A single whisper from outside, a single dark presence, and that weakness becomes the doorway. It does not need to be kicked open. It is already ajar. Most people, when afraid of spirits or demons, will run to external solutions. They will burn sage, call upon names of power, or seek the help of spiritual leaders. These actions may calm the surface, but they do not change the current underneath. And just as a still lake can hide a turbulent undercurrent, so too can a person appear calm while drowning in inner shadows. A ritual can clear the space for a moment, but if the individual returns to anger, bitterness, or hopelessness, then the darkness returns. It was never just outside, it was echoing something already there. The demon that harms you most is not the one that visits in your dreams or stands at the foot of your bed. It is the one that speaks through your voice when you lose your temper. It is the one that drives your hand to betray someone you once loved. It is the one that watches silently as you justify your worst behavior. These are not fantasies. These are real manifestations of energies and entities that thrive on suffering and disharmony, and they do not enter our lives uninvited. The invitation is subtle: a grudge held too long, a lie told too often, a pain buried too deep. To recognize this is not to blame yourself, it is to empower yourself. If darkness begins within, then so does light. But first, we must see clearly what we carry. We must sit in silence and listen to what speaks inside us. Not the voice we show the world, but the one we try to hide, the voice that complains in secret, that judges in silence, that fears everything it cannot control. This voice must be heard, acknowledged, and transformed. Only then can we say that we are truly guarding against evil, not by force, but by clarity. A person who becomes deeply honest with themselves is already on the path of protection. For demons do not thrive in truth, they thrive in denial. They nest in the places we refuse to look. So we must look. We must observe our reactions, our patterns, our attachments. Why do certain people trigger us? Why do we repeat the same mistakes? Why do we say things we later regret? These are not just flaws of character. These are signs, indicators that something inside us remains unhealed, and that this unhealed wound is the feeding ground for lower energies. There is no demon stronger than your unresolved self, and there is no exorcism more powerful than full awareness. If you can sit with with your pain, examine it, and dissolve its control over you. Then the spirits that once haunted you will find no place to rest. They may come, but they will not stay. They may whisper, but their words will have no root, because the soil has changed. The inner landscape has been cleared. When you realize that evil begins within, a great shift occurs. You stop fearing shadows. You stop running from stories. You begin the real work, not of chasing away spirits, but of making yourself the kind of being that no darkness wants to approach. You do not just perform light, you become it. But the beginning of that path always is inner recognition, the courage to face your own mirror, to see what lies beneath the surface of your smile, and to take responsibility for it. Not through shame, but through understanding. Not through denial, but through transformation. There are realities that exist beyond what the human eye can perceive. Just as a dog can hear frequencies we cannot, or a bat can navigate using sonar invisible to our senses, there are dimensions and energies moving all around us that go unnoticed by ordinary awareness. It is a mistake to believe that only what can be touched or measured is real. The presence of spirits, benevolent or malevolent, is part of that unseen reality, and whether we acknowledge it or not, we are constantly walking through fields of invisible influence. Some rooms feel heavy the moment you step inside. A certain silence grips the walls. You do not know why, but your skin tightens. Your breath changes, your senses become alert. This is not imagination, it is perception without form. The energetic imprint of events, emotions, and entities can linger in places. And it is not limited to ancient ruins or haunted woods. Sometimes a home filled with years of bitterness will feel darker than any graveyard. Sometimes a person will carry such intensity of suppressed emotion that it feels like walking into a storm. When they enter a room, spiritual presences are drawn not to appearances, but to frequencies. The human being is not only flesh and blood, it is vibration and consciousness. Every thought has a frequency, every emotion is a signal. And just as bees are drawn to nectar, invisible beings are drawn to the vibrations that nourish or feed them. Not all spirits feed on pain, but those we label as evil, dark, or demonic certainly do. They are sustained by what depletes us: fear, hatred, rage, hopelessness. These are not just emotional states, they are openings. Once a person begins to understand that spirits are attracted not to physical beauty or wealth, but to change, it becomes less about avoiding cursed places or haunted objects and more about cultivating clarity and emotional sovereignty. Because these presences do not only live in ruins or forests, they live in memory, in trauma, in unresolved guilt. They enter through doorways we don't even know we've opened. Children, for example, often see things adults cannot. Their innocence and openness allow them to perceive more of the spiritual dimension. As they grow older and are told repeatedly, it's just your imagination, that doorway slowly shuts, but the spirits remain. Just because we stop seeing them doesn't mean they stop existing. Just because we no longer believe doesn't mean they are no longer affecting us. Their presence is not dependent on our belief. It is dependent on resonance. That is why a skeptic can still be haunted. That is why a priest can still fall under spiritual attack. Many people think that spirits must appear visually with ghastly forms or dramatic manifestations. But their presence is often far more subtle and far more dangerous. A thought that is not your own but keeps repeating in your mind. A sudden, overwhelming emotion that has no root in the moment. A heaviness that begins in your chest and spreads like smoke. These are not always symptoms of illness. Sometimes they are signs of something deeper, an attachment, an influence, an energetic invasion. In some cases, spirits attach themselves to places because of the intensity of what occurred there. Violent acts, prolonged suffering, or deaths filled with fear can leave energetic echoes that attract entities of the same frequency. These places become spiritual swamps, and those who walk through them unaware may find themselves carrying something they did not enter with. Other times, spirits attach to people, often those with weakened boundaries, those drowning in grief, addiction, or self-loathing. Not out of malice always, but because they find food there. Just as a fire draws oxygen, these entities draw from the inner chaos of human beings. One must begin to train the awareness beyond the five senses. You do not need to see a spirit to feel its presence. Stillness is your first teacher. In silence, in meditation, you begin to feel more. You start noticing the shifts in energy, the drop in your mood when entering certain places, the sharpness behind certain thoughts. You begin to question not only what you think, but who might be speaking behind the thoughts. This is not paranoia. This is spiritual awareness. The same way a skilled tracker notices signs in the forest, a broken twig, a footprint, a scent. So too much begin to notice the signs of spiritual presence. Protection starts with perception. You cannot protect yourself from what you refuse to acknowledge. The modern mind is trained to dismiss anything that cannot be quantified. But in doing so, it becomes blind to the most significant influences in life. How can you explain intuition, the feeling of being watched, the knowledge that something is behind you even when you see nothing? These are not defects of the mind. They are functions of a deeper intelligence, an inner compass tuned to energies that our logic cannot grasp. There are spirits that heal, that protect, that guide. But there are also those that deceive, that drain, that manipulate. The difference lies in the signature they leave behind. A true guide will leave you more peaceful, more centered, more courageous. A dark presence will leave you confused, agitated, self-destructive. You must learn to feel the difference. Not with panic, but with presence. Not with superstition, but with still observation. To begin protecting yourself from what you cannot see, you must first admit that such things exist, not only in stories, but in reality. Not only in temples or ancient texts, but in your own surroundings. In the emotional residue of your home, in the ancestral wounds you carry, in the inner dialogue that no longer feels like your own, and in the strange patterns that repeat again and again, as if something unseen is pushing the pieces in directions you cannot explain. Spirits do not kick down doors. They do not need to. The door is often already open, not with a key, but with a frequency. What you fear, what you obsess over, what you emotionally magnify becomes a signal, a vibration, and the unseen world listens carefully. It listens not to your words, but to your emotional state. What you emit is what you invite. The invitation is not spoken out loud. It is felt deep in the realm of energy and emotion. Fear, anger, jealousy, hatred, these are not just emotions that make the human experience difficult. They are much more than that. These emotions lower the vibrational field of your being. The moment your vibration drops, your boundaries weaken. Your energetic field, once protective like a wall of light, begins to thin. This thinning is not visible to the eye, but it can be sensed. In that state, external influences begin to find their way in. Like smoke seeping through the cracks in a window, they enter silently, subtly, and often unnoticed until they have already nested within you. The mind plays a powerful role in this process. When you dwell on certain thoughts repeatedly, especially those rooted in pain, trauma, or fear, you amplify the frequency of those emotions. This repetition becomes a form of energetic ritual, no candles, no symbols, just your attention cycling over and over through the same dark pattern. That is how most people invite spiritual interference without even realizing it. They do not need to summon anything with incantations. They summon it by being consumed with worry, hate, regret, or despair. The demon that is fed daily is the one that grows strongest. Even if you never speak its name, there is an ancient understanding passed down quietly that where your attention goes, energy flows. And where energy flows, creation follows. This is not just a metaphor. This is spiritual law. If your attention constantly flows toward the things you fear or despise, then your energetic field becomes saturated with that vibration. In such a state, malevolent entities or energies find alignment. They do not possess, they resonate. Like a tuning fork placed beside another, your state of being begins to hum at the same pitch as theirs. That is how possession, influence, or attachment begins. Not with dramatics, but with daily emotional patterns. Even in relationships, the energies you attract often mirror what you carry inside. If you hold unresolved rage, you may find yourself surrounded by conflict. If you carry hidden guilt, you may attract situations that punish. If your heart is full of fear, your path will seem filled with threats. These are not coincidences. They are echoes of your internal world manifesting externally. It is not a punishment. It is a mirror, and the spirits that arrive through that mirror do not arrive by mistake. They are drawn to what you broadcast. Sometimes a person asks, "Why me? Why would a dark spirit come to me?" The answer lies not in surface details, but in vibrational truth. What are you feeding emotionally? What have you refused to let go of? What pain have you made a home for? These questions reveal the pathways that may be open. It is uncomfortable to admit, but necessary for growth. Without recognizing these internal openings, no amount of external protection will be enough. You can cover your home in symbols, but if you sleep with rage in your heart, the signal still transmits. This is also why some people, even in the midst of chaos, seem untouched by negative forces. It is not because they are lucky. It is because their vibration remains steady. Their minds do not swell. Their emotions do not sink into hate. They guard their energy not with superstition, and that discipline of thought, of feeling, of intention becomes their armor. In contrast, someone else may perform rituals, recite present, wear charms, but remain vulnerable because their internal state remains chaotic. Ritual is powerful when it is backed by purity of intent and clarity of mind. But when it is used as a substitute for internal responsibility, it becomes hollow. The spiritual world responds to essence, not performance. If you say words of light but live in thoughts of darkness, then your essence is what spirits will recognize. Not your decoration, not your tradition, but your frequency. That is what speaks most loudly in the invisible realm. Understanding that we attract what we fear is not meant to shame or condemn. It is meant to awaken. Fear is natural, but when it becomes chronic, it distorts your vibration. It sends a constant distress signal, and just as predators in nature are drawn to weakness, so too are certain spirits drawn to energetic vulnerability. The more you dwell in fear, the more your reality begins to reflect that fear, not because you are cursed, but because you have unconsciously shaped your frequency to match it. It is a profound responsibility to know that we are not just receivers, but transmitters, that every thought, every feeling sends out a ripple, and the unseen world responds to those ripples. Whether you are aware of it or not, you are constantly communicating with forces beyond the visible, The question is not whether spirits are influencing you. The question is, what are you broadcasting to them? What are you offering through your attention, your emotion, your vibration? To attract peace, you must cultivate peace. To repel darkness, you must stop feeding it with fear and anger. The vibration you hold becomes the shield you carry. But this shield cannot be forged in one day. It must be built through daily awareness of what you feel, what you think, what you allow to grow within you. Because the spirits that enter our lives are not random. They are reflections of what our vibration has invited. And the only way to change what you attract is to change what you radiate. Most people look for quick answers when they feel threatened by dark energies or malevolent spiritual forces. They search for protection spells, sacred objects, powerful mantras, or ancient rituals. These tools are often treated like magical locks to keep evil out. But true protection does not come from a single act. It comes from a way of living. It is not a chant repeated once in fear, but a commitment lived every day in awareness. Protection is not something you apply, it is something you become. And to become it, discipline is essential. Rituals can have meaning. A candle lit with pure intention, a prayer said with a clear heart, a symbolic gesture performed with reverence. These are not useless, but they are only as powerful as the person behind them. A blade is only deadly in the hand of one trained to use it. The same is true of spiritual tools. When used as a substitute for inner alignment, they are fragile and often ineffective. One cannot walk through life filled with hate, envy, fear, or arrogance and expect a crystal or a mantra to shield them from energetic consequences. The quality of one's protection is directly linked to the quality of one's daily inner state. Protection is an ongoing practice. Like the body must be exercised to remain strong, the spirit must be aligned to remain resilient. And just like you cannot exercise once and remain fit forever, you cannot purify yourself once and assume you are forever shielded. Every day you are exposed to energies through conversations, media, environments, emotions. Each of these carries a frequency. Some uplift, others pollute. If you do not cleanse your inner space consistently, you begin to collect residue. That residue builds quietly. It clouds the mind, weakens the energy field, and slowly creates openings for dark influences to enter. Start with how you speak. Words carry vibration. Gossip, lies, sarcasm, cursing. These do not only affect the listener, they degrade the speaker. Each word spoken without awareness chips away at your internal harmony. When your language is careless, your vibration is lowered. And when your vibration is lowered, your shield weakens. Similarly, the thoughts you entertain shape your reality. If your mind is constantly filled with negative self-talk, fear of the future, or obsession with others' failures, then your inner world becomes chaotic. That chaos becomes the fertile ground in which malevolent energies can thrive. What you eat also plays a role. Food carries memory. The way it is grown, prepared, and consumed affects the body and spirit. Overindulgence, mindless consumption, or a diet rooted in cruelty and imbalance does not just affect your health. It clouds your energy. The body becomes heavy, the mind becomes dull, and your spiritual awareness begins to dim. This dimming is not metaphorical. When your senses are dulled, you cannot feel subtle energy. You do not sense when something dark begins to approach. And when you cannot sense it, you cannot respond to it. This is how spiritual vulnerability begins, not with attack, but with numbness. Your environment reflects your mind. A cluttered space is rarely just about physical mess. It often mirrors an unsettled mental state. Chaos in the outer world amplifies confusion in the inner world, And confusion is an invitation to anything that thrives in distortion. Keeping your living space clean, organized, and energetically clear is not just about aesthetics. It is a form of spiritual hygiene. Just as you would not eat from a dirty plate, do not expect to find peace in a space where the energy is stagnant or polluted. Incense, sunlight, sound, and intention can all be used to restore clarity, but the most important element is consistent care. Then there is the question of intention. What drives your actions each day? Are you moved by fear, greed, revenge, or competition? Or are your choices guided by clarity, compassion, and balance? Demonic or dark energies cannot attach easily to those who act with integrity. Not because such people are flawless, but because their internal compass is stable. They may fall, but they correct themselves quickly. They may be tempted, but they see through illusion. This steadiness repels lower energies. It tells the invisible world this one is not easily manipulated. Darkness prefers the unstable, the confused, the impulsive. It seeks the cracks in one's foundation. Many think of protection as armor, but more accurately, it is light. A person who cultivates inner light through disciplined thought, word, action, and intention does not need to be afraid of darkness. That light is not loud, it does not announce itself, but spirits, both good and bad, can feel it. Just as a moth knows where the flame is, so too do entities know who is burning with clear energy and who is flickering with confusion. The brighter your internal light, the more you must tend to it, not to show it off, but to keep it strong. Fire must be fed. And what feeds the inner fire is self-discipline, self-awareness, and consistent alignment with higher principles. Some people wait until they are under attack to start their spiritual practice. But by then, the field is already weakened. The better path is prevention. Live in such a way that dark entities have no room to rest. Do not give them a place to hide in your habits. Do not let them find in your addictions, your grudges, your laziness. Remove the hooks before they sink in. That is the meaning of daily discipline, not as punishment, but as protection, not as a burden, but as a sacred responsibility to the life force moving through you. You are not only a physical body, you are a spiritual structure, and what you do each day either strengthens or weakens the architecture of that structure. How you live is the true ritual. How you breathe, think, speak, respond, and forgive. These are the hidden mantras, the unseen offerings, the real circle of salt that keeps the dark outside. Darkness does not need to be fought. It needs to be displaced. A candle does not wage war against the shadows in a room. It simply shines and the shadows retreat on their own. This is the fundamental truth of spiritual protection. The more aligned you are with light, the less room darkness has to exist within or around you. Not because darkness is weak, but because it cannot coexist with the frequency of genuine light. This light is not about positivity in the superficial sense. It is not about smiling all the time, speaking kindly while holding resentment, or pretending that pain doesn't exist. True light is consciousness, awareness, and integrity. It is the presence of clarity in the midst of confusion. It is stillness that does not collapse under pressure. It is the unshakable connection to what is eternal within you. The greatest mistake people make is trying to fight darkness with more darkness, responding to fear with panic, reacting to deception with more control, trying to overcome evil with force. This only feeds the same frequency. The darkness may change form, but it remains present. Energy can only be transformed by rising above the frequency where it was created. This is why aligning with light is not optional if you truly wish to be free from the grip of dark forces. You cannot fight your way out. You must rise. Rising begins with recognition. You must see where your own energy has dipped into darkness, the anger you justify, the bitterness you feed, the doubt you entertain day after day. These are the places where shadows are invited. But if you bring light into those spaces, not through denial, but through awareness, then the darkness begins to dissolve. Awareness is the first form of light. When you see clearly, you cannot be easily deceived. You cannot be used. You cannot be silently fed upon by energies that operate best in confusion and unconsciousness. The alignment with light happens not in bursts of emotion, but in steady choices. Each day you are given hundreds of small decisions to judge or to understand, to react or to reflect, to grasp or to release. Every time you choose the higher response, even in silence, you build light. This light accumulates. It strengthens your field, it deepens your inner foundation. And as it grows, you begin to notice that things shift. The nightmares stop, the strange coincidences lessen. The sense of heaviness begins to lift, not because the world has changed, but because your resonance has. Light is also truth, not just external truth, but inner truth, living in alignment with what you know to be right, even when no one is watching, is a spiritual force. It protects not by blocking attacks, but by making them irrelevant. A being aligned with truth becomes clear, and clarity dissolves confusion. Confusion is the cloak behind which many dark forces hide, but when a person is rooted in truth, their energy becomes sharp, penetrating. Nothing murky can cling to it for long. Compassion is another form of light, and it is not weakness. True compassion comes from strength. It comes from understanding pain without becoming pain. It comes from seeing the suffering of others and choosing not to amplify it. Spirits that feed on despair find no food in a compassionate heart, because that heart, while open, is not leaking. It gives, but it does not drain. Compassion is the warmth that keeps the soul supple and alive, even in a world where cruelty often seems louder. Stillness is another light. In stillness, all masks fall. You begin to see clearly, not only the world, but yourself. In that stillness, you connect to what is eternal, and the eternal is untouchable. When you root yourself in that stillness, you cannot be pulled into chaos so easily. And when you are not reactive, when you are not dancing to the strings of fear or rage, you become invisible to forces that rely on emotional turbulence to latch onto you. Stillness then becomes not only peace, it becomes power. The light you align with also determines the beings that surround you. Just as lower entities are attracted to fear and disarray, higher presences are drawn to sincerity, humility, and devotion. You do not need to summon them with grand ceremonies. They are already near, waiting for the right frequency to descend it into. When you create that space within yourself, through thought, through action, through consistent presence, you become a place of refuge for higher forces. And where such forces dwell, lower ones cannot remain. You become not only protected, but protective, a source of clarity in a murky world. This alignment is not perfection. Tension, fall. Yet you will get angry, you will fear, you will lose your balance. But the rest is what matters. Each return to presence, to integrity, to compassion strengthens the light, and this light begins to burn off the shadows long before they reach you. It clears the path ahead and behind. It radiates outward. People feel it even if they don't understand it. Spirits feel it even more because light does not lie. It is unmistakable. Even the darkest entity recognizes it and knows where it is not welcome. There are no shortcuts to this alignment. You cannot borrow light. You cannot fake it. You must build it yourself through choices, through discipline, through surrender. And as it grows, you will begin to understand that the only real protection is not something you wear, chant, or hang over your doorway. It is something you become. It is the light you embody, the stillness you return to, the truth you live by, the compassion you offer, the awareness you sharpen. This is what keeps darkness from entering, not because it is blocked, but because it no longer belongs in your presence. You are not merely protected. You are untouchable, not through force, but through resonance.